Welcome to the 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center's quarterly program, Learning in a Virtual Environment, live. Highlighting relevant topics in 21st CCLC out-of-school time programming, special guests from the field, upcoming technical assistance, and website features. Let's get started with today's 21st CCLC NTAC Live. Here are your hosts, Brittany and Hillary.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for Community Roots, Strengthening Rural Education with 21st CCLC Initiatives. We're thrilled to have you with us as we explore how rural 21st CCLC programs can harness the power of local community assets and form innovative partnerships to overcome some of the common challenges faced by programs in rural areas. My name is Hillary, and I'm a Senior TA Liaison with the U.S. Department of Education's National Technical Assistance Center, or NTAC. I'm honored to be co-hosting this session with Brittany, who is a TA Liaison.
Thank you so much, Hillary. I'd like to echo Hillary's welcome and to express our excitement about today's session. As rural educators, administrators, and program leaders, you are all too familiar with the barriers that can arise, such as geographic isolation, limited resources, and the challenge of engaging families and youth in widely dispersed communities. But with those challenges come incredible opportunities. Rural communities are often tight-knit, deeply connected to their local culture, and brimming with the potential partners that might not initially seem obvious, such as small businesses, libraries, or healthcare organizations. Today, we are going to discuss how you can tap into these community roots to foster meaningful partnerships that not only support your programs, but also enhance the entire community. We'll be hearing from some fantastic guests who have built successfully and sustained rural 21st CCLC programs by leveraging local resources, and they'll share insights that you can take back to your own programs. After today's session, you will be able to develop a community asset map tailored to your rural area, incorporating both local and regional resources. Build partnerships with unconventional organizations such as local hospitals, fire departments, and small businesses. Strengthen those partnerships and sustain long-term relationships that benefit your program and the community. Hillary, would you like to introduce our guests for today?
Absolutely. So joining us today are professionals who are implementing best practices in rural communities and creating opportunities for students to participate in 21st CCLC programs, as well as subject matter experts who can share with us strategies around these programs. And so our guests today are Amanda Domino, the 21st CCLC Data Collection and Reporting Manager for the Montana Office of Public Instruction, and Clarion Harf, the Executive Director of the MAPS Media Institute. For our audience today, if you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the Q&A box that you can find at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address them later in the session. And as Dave Mazza mentioned, you can also introduce yourself in the chat, share comments there, and use the reaction buttons to like or share things that you're enjoying. That's excited, Brittany.
You're right.
You know, when we think about successful 21st CCLC programs, we think about programs like the ones we're talking with today. Before we jump in, though, we want to share a clip about the wonderful work that they're doing.
Take one.
Take one.
And then slap that thing. Here we go.
I don't live near anybody. My nearest neighbor is like over a mile away. So like growing up, I wouldn't have like access to like friends as much. And the after school program was really good because of that. And I was able to meet a bunch of really cool people and really like search for what I want to do when I grow up and the type of person I want to be. Just like this, like a bunch of super snazzy middle schoolers learning how to be on a film set and cameras and sound and directing. Yeah.
We've had multiple providers tell us. I had a student come to me today and say the only reason I came to school today was so I could come to the program after school. And so I think that speaks volumes to what our after-school providers are giving these students.
Yeah, what did you guys write about, girls?
That we love about 21st century.
About 21st century? What did you guys write about? What do you like? New activities, yes. How about you, Jaylery? What do you like, Kenny?
I said I love 21st century because I get to see my friends.
You get to see your friends? Awesome. Okay. All right. Good job. Good job, girls. Within the 21st Century program, our main goal for the program is just life skills enrichment, and we've offered a variety of activities. We've had activities from shoe tying class all the way to various STEM activities, just a variety. How's swimming club going? Are we almost ready to go swimming next week? Yes! Oh, good job! Wow.
Well, that was wonderful, and a little insight into at least some programs in the state of Montana where both of our panelists are from. If you want to see the whole video, our producer shared the link for it in the chat. But now we want to talk about 21st CCLC program. For it to be successful, especially in rural areas, partnerships are absolutely successful. But partnerships don't just happen overnight, do they?
No, they don't. I think what's often misunderstood is that partnerships are more like a journey than a destination. There are so many different forms that they can take, and not partnerships need to look the same to be effective. It's really about understanding where your partnership is on the partnership continuum and finding ways to grow and strengthen that relationship over time.
The partnership continuum really is such a helpful framework for seeing that there's value in every stage of a partnership. Even if you're just exchanging information with a local organization, that's an important first step. We call that network. It's the foundation where you're starting to share resources and information for mutual benefit.
Right. And at the networking level, you're not making any big commitments yet, but you are starting to build those connections. Then, as that relationship grows, you can move into coordinating, where you start to blend your activities in some way. Maybe you're organizing a joint event or activity, but you're still operating independently.
Once you're sharing resources, you've reached the cooperating stage. This is where partnerships start to gain more traction because you're pooling what you have. Maybe you're sharing space, materials, or even staff time. You're starting to see the impact of coming together.
Yes, and then from there, you can move on to collaborating. And this is a deeper level of engagement where you're not just sharing resources, but you're actually learning from each other and improving your capacity together. Collaborating means you're co-creating something that's bigger than what either of you could have done alone.
At the deepest level, you have integrating. That's when you and your partner are fully merging operations and resources, working together as if you're one entity. You're not just collaborating on the project, you're operating as a united team with shared goals, resources, and long-term plans.
But here's the important part, right? Not every partnership needs to reach that final stage to be effective. You might have a long-term partnership that stays in the cooperating or collaborating level, and that's okay. What matters is that you're intentional about where you want that partnership to go and how it can benefit both your program and your partner.
One thing that really helps when building these partnerships is having a solid understanding of your community's assets. This is where community asset map comes in. If you've never made an asset map before, it's basically a way of identifying all the strengths, resources, and potential partners that already exist in your community. And when you're in a rural area, your asset map might look a little different. You might not have as many traditional partners, such as a large corporation or organization, but that's okay. The goal is to identify what you do have. So maybe there's a local library that's eager to visit your program or a small business that's willing to donate. It could even be an individual. It's about recognizing that the resources you need are often already around you, even if they're not obvious.
Another thing we need to keep in mind, though, is that sometimes in rural areas, you might need to expand your asset beyond just your immediate town or county. This is where it is important to think about state or region-wide resources. For example, maybe there is a regional business that supports education initiatives. or a state-run program that can provide transportation assistance. By looking beyond just your local area, you can tap into a wider network of support that might be available to your rural programs like yours. Expanding your asset map to include state or regional resources can make a huge difference, especially when those local resources are limited. Sometimes we think of rural as farms and wide open spaces, but not every rural location will have that as an asset. If that's the case, no need to worry. There are always other options. For instance, maybe your community has a local clinic or fire department or even a parks and rec that can provide valuable support.
So, not every rural community has access to a farm, but they may have access to something equally valuable that just hasn't been tapped into. The key is to think creatively and be open to partnerships that may not seem traditional.
Speaking of partnerships, we are thrilled to have Amanda Domino with us today. Amanda has done some incredible work building partnerships in rural areas, and she is going to share some insights on how they have used the partnership continuum. Welcome, Amanda. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you have done, and how you engage with programs?
Certainly. Good morning, everybody. It's morning here in Montana. I'm not sure where everybody is, but thank you for inviting me. And we in Montana, we have a couple of urban areas, some smaller areas, and a lot of rural and extremely small communities within our state. We have areas that have as little as 30, 40 people in them, with a school with maybe 10 families, all the way up to an urban area of Billings, which is over 110,000 and has multiple schools. So we experience the rural aspect of after-school programming on a daily basis, and it does take some work on thinking outside the box often when we start talking about partnerships and how do we continue to provide these programs and have the partnerships that can not only help during 21st century programming, but throughout the existence of our program. So when first starting to build partnerships with community organizations, some of the pieces that we really try to stress with our programs is to make sure that you have that clear vision and mission of your program. And if you're in a very rural area, it's going to look a lot different than if you're in a larger urban area. And that's okay. Even in an area as small as 50 people, once you identify that mission and vision, you can start to think about how you're going to reach out to partners. Before that, you do want to develop your core group of, you can call it a board of directors, you can call it an advisory board, and in rural areas, it may be as small as 2 or 3 people. Just 2 or 3 of you who really want this program to get off the ground. You are passionate about this. You see the need for your students. It doesn't have to be 10, 15 people. It can be 2 or 3 who have that initial passion. That's the beginning. And then it will grow based on how you reach out to your community and having that open mind of knowing what your mission and vision is, knowing what the students in your community need. So when you start looking at those partners that are going to be part of your organization, as we know, you want people, within your 21st century program, hopefully have some after school experience. A lot of people may not, and they may learn that as they join, and that's okay, especially in rural areas. I think people are afraid, oh, I haven't worked in after school. That's okay, you'll learn. If you have a passion for kids, you can be a part of these wonderful programs. You can have people who have business experience on your advisory committee, community member partners, program management professionals, school administration. I've been involved in a group, and middle school principal is on our board. Some of you may have a elementary, middle school, high school principal who is also the superintendent. Would they be interested? Maybe not. They're very, very busy, but they may be an outside source for you to contact. So don't be afraid to contact them. Just be intentional, as they say, when you do. Really, educators, mental health specialists. I know of a board member that is a retired drug and alcohol counselor. He isn't anymore, but he is an amazing mentor, absolutely amazing mentor. And he's helpful to the other people on the program because he can talk to people. If one of your staff or one of your volunteers comes in and has a concern, he can help with that. So can the school principals. They can help you with students who may be struggling and they may not be able to give you specific insight, but they can give you some help. And if you can communicate with them, they have resources that can help students too. So that school connection is vital. In rural communities, often the school is the centerpiece of the community. It is absolutely vital that you create that partnership with the school. They may be able to partner with you on programming, but they definitely can partner with you on getting information out to families. They're the first contact for families often. It's so important that you work with them so that families know about your program. In rural areas, that face of your program is essential within your community. Getting the word out, making sure that everybody in your community knows who you are. So once you've sort of decided who you are going to have as your core group, then you can really start looking at your vision of what an active partnership might look like. I say active because I have seen partners written down, but I'm not really sure, what does that look like? What are you doing? What are you providing to that partner? And what is that partner providing for you? It's a mutually beneficial relationship, and it's important for you both to know, what is my role within this partnership? That prevents a lot of confusion in the future if you line that out right from the beginning. Some partners are going to be set up more officially than others in a rural community. If you're working with the school, they may require a memorandum of agreement. A memorandum of agreement is a legal document, and they may need to have that based on the rules and regulations and protocols that they have to follow as a school. Or you may have a partnership with someone that is under a memorandum of understanding. Still a document outlining what you're going to do as a partner and how you're going to benefit each other, but is not have the same legal standing that a memorandum of agreement would have. I have been involved in programs where we work with a city council. They are probably going to want to have some sort of memorandum of agreement. If you have a local person who wants to help with a program or supply something, that might be a memorandum of understanding. Highly recommended, sometimes required. So you identify, okay, what does an active partnership look like within our community? Everything, obviously, at this local level, all these rural communities are so different. Again, do you have 50 people in your community? Do you have 2,000 people in your community? It's gonna change what that dynamic looks like. Identifying the assets in the community, I feel as though there's so many so many avenues for this. One of the first things that I have seen that was really one thing that I have seen that was really helpful was a group organized a community networking day. And they brought together all of the local nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations, nonprofit organizations, service groups, individuals, anybody who is interested in coming together and finding out what each of these programs do. Is there any overlap? Are we overlapping? Do we meet the needs of certain nonprofits within the community? Maybe not so much others, but you would be surprised at the commonalities that you will have with these other organizations once you get into a room with them. As was being spoken about, that's sort of the initial, like gathering that information. You may not necessarily have the partners yet, but it really helps you kind of get a sense in your head of, okay, where do we need to go? Who do we need to talk to? A lot of what I've heard from many 21st century programs over the years is, without this funding, we could not have a program. And I understand that this is a difficult situation for many rural communities. But what I'd really like, what I try to stress to many local communities is partnerships are the key. And the ability to find partners, if you have an open mind, is amazing. There may be partners out there that you never would have thought of at the outset, but then suddenly they'll come to you and say, I heard about your program, I'm interested. So I talked about schools being partners. Remember homeschool organizations. If you go through your county superintendent, they can often be very helpful in getting information out to your homeschool programs. That I've found that there's homeschool communities have increased in areas here, and the homeschool communities are looking for opportunities for their students for additional programming that they may not be able to provide at home, that are group settings. They find out that there's an organization within your small community that's offering it, and I've seen a huge increase in the amount of programming with homeschool students and organizations. Businesses. If you're in a town with 50 people, do you have a grocery store? Do you have a gas station with a mechanic? Do you have the rancher? Are there any ranches around you? In Western United States, likely there's going to be a ranch somewhere within at least your county, I would think. And you would be surprised at the support you can get from them and the opportunities that they can create for your program. Restaurants, a bank. Do you have a bank in your town? Think about all the different people within your community. Who are the movers and shakers? You have 50 people, there's going to be at least 1 or 2 movers and shakers in your community. I can just about guarantee it. The other piece, I'm going to back up a little bit when you're creating that advisory board, that board of directors, is think broadly about who is on that. It's great if you all have the same passion and you're all thinking they're moving in the same direction. But the more diversity you have in that group, the more people you can reach outside your initial group. I've learned that, for example, I've been involved in a group, and one of the people of the founding organizers happens to know a local sheep rancher. And I would never have thought to reach out to this person, but they just happened to be talking to them because they live near them. They just happened to be talking to them and telling them about the program. They are now an anonymous donor of anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 a year. Just heard about the program, thought it was great, love that we're helping youth. Boom. I never would have thought of that. So the diversity on your advisory board is key to reaching all these different people within your community. They may have different relationships and will bring people in that you would never expect to see. You wouldn't necessarily think of them. So I think that that's really important. As I said, there may be philanthropists within your town. Maybe not. There's community foundations within small communities often. Look for it. Are there trust boards? Then parent-teacher organizations. Those can be very helpful in contacting and connecting parents, also helping you connect with the school. If many 21st century programs are located within schools, but there are those that are community-based organizations. And it's important to show your face at the school, even if you're a community-based organization. They need to know who you are. They need to know your mission. They need to know your passion. And they need to understand the partnership that you want to develop with them, not to add extra work to their plate, but to provide services that may not be able to be provided within the school district. It's so important to make those connections with the administration, with teachers, with parent-teacher associations, anyone at the school that you may be able to support, as well as they may be able to provide supports for you. I don't know private schools. Sometimes there are private schools, maybe not directly in your community, but again, as you expand out from your community, there may be private schools. Are there any connections that you can make there? Then you get down to your city, your county, your state, your federal government resources. If in the state of Montana, and I believe that Clarion will touch base more on this, there are now 8 Indian nations throughout our state, and they have many, many services that can help make connections for programs and bring in services for after-school programs. Incredibly wonderful, tight-knit communities. The elders of these Indian nations are dedicated to helping the youth of their communities, as is all elders of all communities, right? But huge resource. City council, county commissioners. What is the setup of your county? In Montana, we have our cities, our counties, our state. However it's set up, can you reach out to them? State agencies, obviously your Department of Education, you have Health and Human Services. You get down to things like our Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in Montana. They provide trunks that can be sent out to programs. You can use that trunk for a certain period of time, and then you send it back, and they can send you another trunk. You have to be able to send it back, yes, but it's free resources to use. Conservation districts. There's a conservation district I happen to be in a county seat. Conservation district is here, Forest Service is here. Conservation district currently is interested in starting an Envirothon program. If any of you are familiar with Lego robotics, it's sort of the same process, but it's based on environmental topics rather than on engineering and STEM topics, which is it's also STEM actually. Your Forest Service. If in the Western United States, and I believe across the country, you'll find your Forest Service, your state, your national parks. They're amazing resources for you. Amazing partners will provide activities and staffing and programming for you. Sometimes we'll come to you if you can't get to them. Faith-based organizations. Faith-based organizations, often, your kids are going to be going to the different faith-based organizations, but there's also people within faith-based organizations who are very interested in volunteering at programs. Maybe it's just to help get your program signed in and signed out. Maybe it's providing snacks for your program. Just really think of all the different aspects of your program and what groups within your community can help to fill those pieces. Outside of that, you have at the state level and federal funding is the Child and Adult Care Food Program. You can work with them and that they can help fund your snack programs after school. Reach out to them. There is some training that is available through that and that is required through that, but it's really helpful programming and helps with funding if you're low on funding. U.S. Department of Agriculture. Then you have your recreational and your hobby groups, fishing groups, quilting groups, biking groups, hiking groups, skateboarding. There are so many organizations that you may not think of. You don't have a skateboarding or you don't have a hiking group or you don't have a biking group. This is where I really encourage people to not feel limited by the resources directly in your local area. Start spreading out the next area. Where is the next area from you? It might be 30 miles away. It might be 50 miles away. It might be 100 miles away. But do those communities provide services that reach yours? Don't be afraid to move out to them and look for them. So an example is the group, which actually I'll get to in a little later, but think about resources, not just right there. If you've got a community of 50 people, you might not have a hiking group or a fishing group. You might have a quilter. Is that quilter willing to come in and teach them sewing? You may have a fisherman. Is he willing to come in and teach your kids how to tie flies or how to put a worm on a hook? Is he willing to take those kids out fishing for one day? You don't have to ask your partners to be there for 50 days or 32 weeks, or maybe it's one day. That would be amazing for those kids, right? You've got a big one that I've seen too is your service organizations. Again, not all communities have active service organizations, but maybe a community the next farther out from you does, who's willing to come in and service you. Rotary is huge. I've seen Rotary do amazing things in communities. Chambers of Commerce. What is your Chamber of Commerce doing? Can you reach out to them? Lions clubs, the Legions, senior citizen centers. Senior citizens are just so wanting to help and continue to be of service. How can you work with them? Can kids go into senior citizen centers and provide services there? Law enforcement. Don't forget your law enforcement. They want to have those connections with youth. They want to come in and even if they just come in and hang out with your youth, that's a big deal it's a big deal on both sides. You create those relationships, that's going to help you in the future. We get into After School Alliance. Most of you are familiar with After School Alliance, both at the state and federal level. Remember that they have training opportunities, they have resources. You can call them at any given time and they can provide you with some supports that you need. They can direct you to other supports. Remember them. And public health facilities, huge. There's a program in my local community. A retired nurse came and said, I really want to do a safe sitter class. Great. We'll provide the space. We will register the kids and we will supply lunch. Came in and did a 2-day safe sitter class. All the kids were certified, has done 2 now, 12 students within our community are now safe sitters with certificates and can go out, and they teach them everything from the business to the safety to they provide CPR and first aid. Just open your doors, give out the information on your program, put it in the face of your communities. Use whatever resources you have. If you have a local newspaper, if you still are putting up flyers, if you're using social media, if you're partnering with the school, all of it, please use those opportunities. So I feel like I've spoken quite a bit here. I don't know what the time frame is, and I want to make sure that there's time for everyone else. Bottom line, I'll just say the last thing: be realistic, but think big. Okay,
Amanda, this was great.
Did do.
Amanda, you are great. This is wonderful. I mean, wow. Did she write this session for us?
I hope that people were like writing down things that they haven't connected with yet, that there was a new idea shared.
Yeah. And by the way, Amanda shared with us many of the resources that she just named, which have been dropped in the chat with links to those websites. Mm-hmm. So go and check those things out. And if you have a specific question in mind that you want to drop in the Q&A, Amanda's going to stick around, and we'll be talking more with her in a few minutes. But also, like a specific question for Amanda, drop it in the Q&A box. So as you are thinking about your current partnerships, think about where do they fall on that continuum. You might have more than you actually realize. And so, Hillary, we've talked about building partnerships, but I think it's important to dig a little bit deeper into what kind of partnerships are possible in rural communities, which Amanda talked a lot about, which was great, but we're going to put a name to it. A lot of the time, these resources we need are actually just right in front of us, and we don't think to ask.
I think one of the things that Amanda is saying, and that we've talked a little bit about, is that rural communities have a sense of connectedness, right? People know each other, and they're often willing to help if they understand how their help benefits everyone, the youth and the community. And so sometimes the resources aren't obvious, and we have to do that creative piece of identifying what they are.
Yeah, and that's where something like community asset mapping comes in handy. So we mentioned it earlier, but let's really dig into it and look at your community in this new light. It's about asking what's here that we haven't tapped into yet. And like we've talked about, sometimes the answer isn't right in your backyard. Sometimes you need to expand your map to look at resources that are available regionally or at the state level.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so if you're in this really small town and you feel like your local resources are limited, don't be afraid to think bigger. Don't be afraid to think about a regional business or a state agency or organization that can help. Maybe there's a statewide educational initiative that you don't know about, that you don't know that you can get kits from Fish and Wildlife and they're going to send you fishing poles that you can borrow and use with your young people. Or maybe you don't know that your state has a partnership with the 4-H where they're willing to get that and bring those resources in. And it's all about being willing to look beyond what's obvious, what's right in front of you. You might find that local artisan that wants to come in and teach students about their craft, right? I know a program where they have someone who's on their school day staff who does working with leather and has come in and done that with their students a few times. And right, the key is to approach these partners with this collaborative mindset. So thinking about how can this partnership benefit them as much as it benefits you? And so on that note, we have another fantastic guest with us today who's really done some creative work around building those unconventional partnerships. And so we have Claren Harf, who has found success working with local organizations that you might not think of as traditional educational partners. We're going to hear a little bit more about what they've done. So Claren, first I'd like to just ask you to tell us a little bit about your program, about MAPS.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you everybody for inviting MAPS and welcoming me to be here today. And Amanda, thanks for all your insights. I always learn from you. First of all, MAPS stands for Media Arts in the Public Schools. We started 20 years ago in Southwest rural Montana. We were founded by a retired Hollywood producer who moved here in the late 90s. And as he was observing youth in this small community, he was like, what do kids who don't do sports or FFA or participate in church activities, what do they do? And a lot of them were getting in trouble, or a lot of them weren't doing anything and stretching their skill sets and trying new things. So he decided to do that second career, if you will, and do a big give back. And that give back was asking the schools in our community down here, we have 5 districts in the valley that I live in, if he could teach a filmmaking class. And one of those schools took him up on it. And he started that filmmaking class, a rural district called Corvallis. 40 kids signed up. And he asked me, at the time I was a nonprofit art consultant, and he said, I can either do this in the school or I could set up my own 501c3. And I said, well, if you went the nonprofit angle, you'll have a lot more freedom. And so he did that. And 20 years ago, MAPS Media Institute was incorporated as a nonprofit. So within the 21st century realm in Montana, we're a little bit of an oddball. I say that with love, not embarrassment. In that we're a CBO, or a community-based org. We're not a school-based program. And what we do, and our mission, is to provide professional media arts opportunities, compassionate mentoring from caring humans, and making sure these youth use these skills, both technical as well as social, to give back to the community. So everything we do, from a program to a project, has to relate back to our mission. So we do that in a number of ways. And actually, if it's okay, if we could start sharing our slideshow. I'm going to talk a little bit about that before we go into your first question. 1 second. All right. So to give a context, next slide, please. This map is courtesy of the Regional Learning Project. It's from the University of Montana over in Missoula. And if you look down, can you circle where we're at? Down in the Salish grounds. This is the area that I'm zooming in from. It's called the Bitterroot Valley. We have a year-round program here, out of school time program, that's partially funded by 21st Century, and that's the one that's 20 years old. We have a second program site over in Helena, and that's the capital of Montana. And we started that one 10 weeks before the pandemic opened. So we're still, I still feel like we're new in that community, even though we're in our 6th year. And then our third program is up in Fort Belknap. And that's a new program for us this year. A lot of my presentation today is going to be about the stories and experiences MAPS has had working with that community. So that gives you a geographical context of how far our nonprofit travels, if you will. The next map I'm going to show you is, next slide, please. This is our program and project sites. So if you look at the white pins, those are the 3 year-round programs I just showed within the territorial map. And then those red pins are part of our 4th program. Our 4th program is not funded by 21st Century. That's called the MAPS Media Lab. And that's what I affectionately call our roadshow. That's where we pack up our curriculum, pack up our equipment and our instructors, and we travel out to these communities. So right now, of those ones that are red, we have 4 current projects that are either in planning, production, or post-production. So I kind of jumped a little bit more than you asked, but that gives a context of what we do. Specifically within the mediums, it's anything with regards to communication and media. So that's graphic design, music production, obviously filmmaking is our anchored medium. New technologies. We work with a brilliant artist who's really at the top of the field in VR and AI. So he's integrating, wise use use for these kids to learn how to utilize these mediums. Yeah, anything that's about how to convey an idea and how to turn it into something. That's what we do. Our program is completely free of charge to all students, whether it's funded by 21st Century or not. And we typically serve youth in grades 8 to 12. We also have workshops for youth 18 to 24, and that's a program we've really been developing specifically after the pandemic, just because they've graduated. A lot of folks who fall in that age range still need a lot of help, so we're helping to fill that gap as well. So yeah, that's MAPS in a nutshell.
So, Claren, you've been really successful at building these partnerships with unconventional organizations in your rural communities that you interact with. Can you walk us through how you first identified these strengths and resources in your community and what led you to approach some of these non-traditional partners?
Yeah, you bet. Could you do the next slide, please? Thank you. First thing that number one, we have a great partnership with Montana Office of Public Instruction, and that's who disseminates our 21st Century funds. The program, that first one, the Ravalli County, that's where I'm zooming in from, established 20 years ago. Our first round of 21st Century funding happened in 2009, and we just received our third 5-year grant. Without that kind of anchor funding, we'd never be able to do what I'm going to talk about next, because that just allows us to have that stability as a program, as well as be able to mark and scale for growth, both internally as a team, as well as all of these external. So I really have to say, in addition to OPI, we've had consistent philanthropic funders, long-term investors, anywhere from as low as $2,000 upwards of 6 figures. And it's that kind of financial investment that makes all of this possible, in addition to our team, and then of course the youth and communities we serve. But I really want to state that out of the gate. Also, within the mediums that we work, it's expensive. I mean, we're tech, everything's expensive, I understand, but in tech, as soon as we buy something, there's a new version to purchase. So that's something that we really do our best to keep up on. And having that kind of asset is certainly a leg in a door. Often in the communities we're at, it's the first time a lot of these youth are having access to these kind of creative tools, let alone the artists who are instructing them. So we have a unique model just out of the gate that's specialized. Not a lot of folks can offer that. So building on who and what we are, the first thing we do whenever we're invited, and that's another thing I want to address too. I don't go fishing on behalf of MAPS. We're almost always exclusively invited. And that's from people seeing our work. And that's, in my experience on behalf of MAPS, that's very important within the Indigenous communities we serve. A lot of times they're asking to learn more about us. They're asking for our track record with youth. They want to see what we've done. They'll call up references or talk with other people we've partnered with. And then we begin that relationship building. It's not a continual knocking on doors or, filling up inboxes on emails. So that style isn't for everybody, but it certainly has worked for us. It's very, I would say that we take the back seat a lot, right? We're not going to be driving something. And so part of that, as far as what's on the screen right now, that community assessment, that's a big one for us. And that's part of those initial conversations when folks reach out to us. I'm the one who does a lot of the research and development on this. So before we have meetings, I'm providing our team with who the leaders are, even historical references for who's no longer there. Certainly any CBOs that are leading in that community, and definitely if it's in a tribal community, the tribal leaders, school leaders, etc. We have a pretty extensive network with youth across the state, and we keep that. We put a lot of investment to keep that up to date. So a lot of times we're able to use social media with youth, and we'll get an introduction to, a hotshot young person in that community, whether they're an artist, whether they're an athlete, you know, whatever their role is, but that's also a really unique way in for us. And again, because of the mediums we're working in, we're kind of seen as cool. And that's mattering with part of our audiences that we serve for sure. So that's number one. Number two, and it ties into what I just said, is that relationship building. We all know it. Amanda talked about it. Anybody on this call knows it. None of us can be out here on our own. And so much of that is my observation, and as well as how I deliver, is how you go about that. And that lends to how I started this part of the segment, taking a back seat, listening, a lot of listening, and doing that with as wide as a group as you can, never kicking down the doors, never forcing our way in. Again, that welcoming. The other one with this R&D is always seeing what's in place. Why duplicate what's already happening, right? We don't want to reinvent wheels. We don't need to. We need to be having evolutionary and larger thought, right? So taking the time to understand what's happening in the community, being able to identify, oh, okay, here's a gap or one that we see. Is this being done in another way that might not be delivered to us right now? So a lot of creative generative thought goes into that. And then the third one ties all back into all three of these, is just making sure that those relationships are being nurtured. And I say that with heart, not just head, right? It's again going back to a lot of listening. So that's our recipe. And part of MAPS' style is always to learn. And I know everybody on this call, if you're not interested in learning and evolving, then in education, we're not in the right field. So always being open to feedback, right? With a real open mind and an open heart, both for like, okay, that makes sense, to like, I'm going to put that one on pause because maybe that's not all MAPS, right? So how to juggle that as well. But yeah, for the most part, open communication, that's the big one, and being willing to take the time, make the time. So what's our next slide on this one, Hunter? What do we have?
Relationships take time, right? The building intentional relationships, they don't happen overnight. And so that's really what we want to ask you next about is, can you talk to us about a partnership that had major impact and how you went about building that relationship and what made it successful?
You bet. Before I go into that, I want to mention one more time on the unique aspect of MAPS. When MAPS started, the first 5 years that Peter Roston was MAPS founder, the retired Hollywood bigwig. He had a brilliant business model that MAPS still carries, and it's part of our income revenue. He donated his own money so that MAPS could create at pro bono to other nonprofits promotional materials for them. So that could be a video, that could be a website, it could be a poster for an event they were having, and it was done for free. He footed the bill personally. I recognize that is not a sustainable model. MAPS does not do that anymore, but he saw that as a business model to get what I call street cred, right? We have done that for over 50 nonprofits in the Bitterroot, Missoula area, statewide, well over 100, and then nationally for organizations like No Kid Hungry, Share Our Strength, the CDC. And it was that model that gave us the credibility. It showed that MAPS was putting its money where its mouth was, literally. And it was youth who was doing it. Of course, we always have artists guiding the way. These kids are learning. There's no doubt about it. But these nonprofits were receiving marketable materials at no cost. So you had youth using their skills to help other nonprofits fundraise. I mean, that is just a beautiful, beautiful recipe for success, right? So that is still part of our model. That's our 5th program. It's a client-based program. The second one is, again, goes back to how I started this, in that MAPS offers services that not a lot of communities or CBOs, nonprofits have access to, right? Like on our team, we have professional filmmakers, professional photographers, professional musicians. And so if a CBO or nonprofit contracts with MAPS to create a video or any kind of promotional material, they're getting it led by a professional, but created by youth. So how media are, a lot of them need to know how media can support their missions. So that's part of MAPS's goal, right? And then again, just goes to what you were just talking about on the consistency. Always being on time, always getting back in an email within a day, like all that professionalism. Helping them know and trust that they can count on us to deliver. Even though we're not a production company, right? We're an educational nonprofit, but we're still going to treat this in the most professional way. So that's a recipe for MAPS. I'm asked about it all the time, and it is undoubtedly part of what got us, I mean, MAP too many times, but undoubtedly what directly contributed to MAP's success. To be a small nonprofit, everybody, we're still under $500,000. So we're still considered a small nonprofit, but we've been able to do this small scalable growth because of models like this. So we've got to build on your question on a specific example. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Fort Belknap Indian community, which is in that north central part of Montana. You can't really get too much more rural than that in the whole United States, Alaska aside. And so can you give me the next slide, please, Hunter? Thank you. This slide was just, or image was just taken last week. We had a huge film festival over at the school as part of Native American Week. And I got at least, I think this is 11th graders. Nobody wanted to do it, but I said, please, I've got this webinar next week. I'd love to get your faces on there. We started in Fort Belknap. We were invited up there through to produce a video for 21st Century Programs by Montana OPI back in 2016. And from that initial beginning, we ended up going up there once or twice a year for a project-based media arts. You typically film, almost exclusively documentary. And it's from there that we were invited to bring a year-round program. The Tribal Council and the 3 school districts of Fort Belknap approved or endorsed MAPS applying for a 21st Century grant last September. And we received that grant this past June. So if there's applause going on out there, thank you, because that was a huge accomplishment as a non-native led org to be invited in, to bring our programming and co-design it with tribal and cultural leaders up there. We're, let's see, 6 weeks into the program and already have more work than we can do. So yeah, so it is a very powerful partnership. I know that this program will also be, it already is a leader in the state on how to show that collaborative capability between Indigenous communities and non. And I'm very grateful and proud to be part of those demonstrators. So we're going to show, what do we got, Hunter? Next slide. Oh yeah, here's some BTS of our kids and crew. The image on the left, we're going to see a video of. They're interviewing an elder on set or on location in Fort Belknap. The second one is a wrap photo. That's the youth crew, and then water resource director. We'll talk more about that project in a minute. And then that guy with the thumbs up is the whole reason why MAPS is up in Fort Belknap. Amanda hit on this when she was talking. Having that key person, the person who knows everybody. And that is someone I look for when MAPS is invited into a new community. Who is that diplomat, right? Not necessarily politicker, but somebody who can relate and listens and understands and typically has been there for a long time. And so in Fort Belknap, that gentleman is the guy with the thumbs up on the right side of the screen, Craig Todd. Yeah, so just wanted to give hats off to him. Next slide is going to be video. This video is part of a project called the Water Educational Videos for Fort Belknap. Fort Belknap is one of the last Indian communities in the state to get a water settlement from the US government. The bill is on President Biden's desk right now. And we were hired last year to work with a group of Harlem High School and The tribal college up there is called Aani Nakota College. Those are the two tribes up there in that community. And we were asked to work with a group of young people to create a series of get out the vote videos, if you will. It wasn't, it was endorsed and approved by the tribe and the Water Resource Department. So that's who hired MAPS. This is not part of the 21st Century Program. So we went up there for 2 weeks. We did an in-person film workshop, and 7 videos came out of that project. The one I'm going to show you is the one that was completely student-led. This is a 2-minute video. It's a poem written by a Harlem High School. Harlem is one of the school districts up there. Harlem High School senior, Tova Anderson. The voiceover is by a young woman named Amelia Blackrow, who we'll talk about a little later. And then the whole production is done by new filmmakers at both a high school and young adult at the tribal college. So this is their take. It's a very creative approach, very poetic, on the importance of water, cultural identity, preservation. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. And Hunter, push go.
The girl with no name stands at the top of the hill. The place where the greenstones sleep. Corralled by mountains and valleys, a few miles from which her grandmother rests. The old man's voice echoes throughout the hills as the tobacco burns. The white clay stains her hands, just as it did to her grandfather, whose name she's never heard. The trees hold the memories of the land and whisper them in the wind. They travel to the place where the red stones swim and the bushes dance with the stars. They cook in the devil's kitchen and share stories of the 16 Sioux. The girl with no name is finally at her first home. They go to the heart of the mountains where the creek never ends. We bathed in the earth and drank from the clouds. The rocks are orange, but will turn to blood that will stain our faces.
Right, thank you, honey. Take us back to the slideshow. Yep. All right, if you're tearing up out there, you're not alone. I certainly did the first time I saw that cut. Yeah, what's our next slide on this, Hunter? Okay, I'll pause there in case you guys have any questions on that.
It's a really hard moment to move past. And so I really want to say very, very little and just say like, so talk to us about, so how do you make it happen? What goes into it?
Actually, can you take the slideshow off for me, just so I can be on screen? Thank you. Yeah, and I didn't mean to be abrupt there.
No, it was beautiful. It's just anything I have to say after that feels so little. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I'd also like to point out that video won the Regional Production Award from the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences Northwest Chapter. just this past June. So yeah, we love those external accolades. Build up those resumes, get those scholarship opportunities, right? How did we make that happen? That's through everything I talked about. That started because that's on a sovereign nation. We were invited by the tribal council. We then approached the Tribal Historic Preservation Office for their approval and endorsement for us to be there. And then we worked with the Water Resource Department. We created a flyer that we did outreach with all the schools, but that guy I talked about, Craig Todd, because I'm 600 miles away from there, right? So we have to have that person on the ground up there. So Craig, who lives up there, went to each of the school districts, went to all of the classes, got a couple school presentations and invited youth to be on there. I would like to point out, we are able to get youth recovery credit for some of our projects because we do match everything to standards for both state and national media arts as well as state content standards. So of the 13 kids who participated in that project, 4 received recovery credit, which is phenomenal, right? That's something we haven't even talked about yet. Yeah. Then we worked virtually. Our editor, brilliant filmmaker, led weekly virtual workshops with the youth on editing those videos. And then we all went back up there and went in front of tribal council and showed the videos, and they then approved it for public dissemination. So that is a 9-month project right there. Of that video, there were 5 others. And the other ones are more documentary. They're more interview based. So the youth who participated were learning interview skills as well as technical operational things like camera, audio, editing, all of that. So yeah, big projects for us. And for our team, for us to make that happen, that takes myself. I manage all the projects, the lead director, IT person, and a lead teacher who designs the curriculum, and then usually at least one other artist. So there were 5 of us on that project, staff. Yeah, a good one.
Just incredible. And I mean, here's an example of, how far 21st century programs can have an impact, right? And not just 21st century, all kinds of after school and enrichment activities are it's just incredible to me. So, I mean, congratulations. Hats off to you for the wonderful work that you're doing at MAPS.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Brittany, we've talked a lot about partnerships, about resources. And although I don't want to, I'm going to switch the channel and talk about a little bit about some of the unique challenges that these rural programs that we're talking about today face, because there are some real logistical hurdles, like 600 miles when you're working in a rural community.
Yeah, and how do you work out issues around transportation whenever the geographical footprint is so large? It can be really difficult to get kids to programs or to get kids home, right? And so it's not something that you can just ignore. If they can't get there, then you're not able to have them participate.
Yeah, and I think this is where rural programs can shine, right? Because you are used to dealing with these challenges and you have to come up with really creative solutions, and you're used to doing it. And so you may work with your local school district so students can use after school or late buses. This, though, may not be an option for everyone. I've seen programs where they do part of their programming on the bus, right? Where they've said, this is part of our program time because our kids have to ride the bus for hours to get home, that they've been creative in that way. And there's no one size fits all solution. The thing is, again, you have to think out of the box.
Yeah, and it's not just transportation that this is a challenge for, right? We also have issues with internet access. And so things like the Affordable Connectivity Program, or we call it ACP, is a great opportunity where schools have set up Wi-Fi hubs in public places. And some of them even have put them on school buses. So like you said, Hillary, it's about finding those creative ways to work with what you have and looking for those resources that are out there.
Another thing some of our communities and rural programs have to deal with is a agricultural schedule that impacts them. If you're in a farming community, there may be times of the year where students are needed to be home to help with planting or harvesting, right? And programs have to be flexible and find ways to accommodate those rhythms in their communities. And so that may mean adjusting your program schedule during certain months of the year, right? Or offering different types of programming that work around those busy seasons. It's about being responsive to the needs of your community. And so as we think about this creative problem solving, we're going to talk to Amanda again. She's done some amazing work in this area and really faced many of these challenges we're thinking about and talking about. And so one of the biggest challenges we recognize for rural programs is transportation. And so can you talk to us a little bit about how you've seen this be addressed? What strategies have you used to ensure students can get to programs or get home from programs, even in some of these remote areas?
Right. And this is a challenge that continues across the state for these rural areas. We have some students, they might live, they're on the bus for a long time to get to school and to get home. They're quite a distance from the school district. So it definitely can create challenges for after-school programming. Many schools have, as you were talking about, created later bus routes, right? So the after-school programs do a lot of scheduling, again, in connection with the school, partnering with the school to make sure that those kids that are in after school can get on the bus, that the kids who are in sports or FFA or speech and drama, that those kids are getting on at the end of the day and get home. Some of the ways that I've seen people getting around are, I don't know if you'd call them old school, carpooling, getting carpooling going for students. Now with that anymore, I think it's really important that you have that in writing, that you make sure you're talking with your families and that it's not just like, oh, well, I'm taking so-and-so home. No, it doesn't quite work that way. You have to have that written down. You have to have that notice from the parents saying, yeah, it's okay for them to bring my child home. So I've seen parents set up somewhere in town where their children can go after programming, so that if they live, 20 miles or 15 miles out of town and they can't get there, their child has somewhere to go after the program. They've worked out, they've got friends in town. They've agreed that, if I can't get there, if the weather is bad and I can't come in and I don't want to, I'm not going to try to come in, can my child stay at your house overnight? And I've seen that quite a bit. The other piece I've seen a program where they have it written into registrations that, can the specific staff members of their program actually provide transportation? Again, that's one where you've got to really look at, is that, how are you going to work on that? And I think sometimes the way situations are now, you do have to possibly bring in somebody who knows, can look over your documents, make sure they're legally sound when you're looking at that. I've seen programs who have actually found, one program I know of, they found the city's lawyer has agreed to do pro bono work for the after school program so that they can look at those forms, make sure those forms are legally sound. And so that has worked, having staff bring them home, children stay in town, late school buses, carpooling. Unfortunately, I do think that the transportation is always going to be one of those pieces that may limit kids who are farther out, who are in farming communities, ranching communities, from participating. However, I did see this summer a program where actually MAPS Media Institute was working with them. And at the very last minute, somebody said, oh, this student needs to be in this. Well, he works on the ranch all the time. and actually got a hold of the parents and said, look, I really think your child would benefit from this. Can you let him go from the ranch for the weekend? And they did, and he did a fabulous job and ended up participating now in a high school First Tech Challenge program, and is getting more involved in town because the family saw the benefit of that program just by that one instance where an adult said, hey, listen, it's happening, it's going on today, there's room, can he come? And they said, okay, so again, communication, right? Communication with families, and sharing your program, making sure families know the benefits of those programs for your students. And then they're oftentimes more apt to take that extra time to drive in to pick up their students, even if they live 20 or 30 miles away. They're going to allow their student to come because they see the benefit of it. A lot of times too, you have a good program. Those kids are going to go home and say, please, 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 I want to go, I want to go. And the parents can't resist, right? So they figure out a way for that child to go, even though it puts a little extra strain on the mileage, but they figure it out. I wish there was some magic button I could push to make it easier, but I don't. I think transportation is a huge issue, and again, it's that being creative and thinking outside the box and talking to your families and figuring out when and how you can get these kids there and back. Programs will go over after school, close enough to the school, and they'll send a staff member over and walk kids over to the program to make sure that they can get there, right? So they make sure there's somebody that can walk them over, and that does a lot for families. If they know their child is getting safely from, if the program's not in the school, if they know their child is safely getting to the program, they're willing to come and pick up the child afterward. Grandma and grandpa will come and pick them up. Older brother or sister will come and pick them up. They make it possible.
Yeah. I mean, Deanna said in the chat that they're running their program till 7 p.m. so that families who need that extra time to travel can get there to pick up students. And I would agree with all of those things. It's just about being creative, whether it's the walking bus, whether it's late hours, whether it's the bus after school. It's just figuring out what's going to work in that community. So we've talked about partnerships, about resources, about problem solving. In this last little bit of time we have, let's talk about one of the most important parts of any 21st CCLC program, community engagement and youth development.
Well, and that's what the programs are all about, right? So it's easy to think about after school programs as just being about academics and enrichment, but we know that youth development, family engagement, these are core components of programs. And so it really is about bringing people together and creating opportunities to connect with older generations.
Yeah. I think the idea of intergenerational programming is especially powerful in rural areas. We've heard some allusion to that, but you have these rich traditions and knowledge that can be passed down from community members to younger generations. And when youth are able to connect with their elders, it fosters a sense of pride and continuity within the community.
Yeah, and it's so much more than just passing down those traditions, right? These programs can help build up mutual respect and understanding between the generations. So when you see that they have a role to play in their community's future, that can be incredibly empowering.
Yeah. And we can't forget the importance of family engagement in that too. In rural areas, families are often deeply invested in their community's success. They succeed or they don't as a community. And so when they feel like they have ownership of the program, they are more likely to stay engaged. And that engagement is what helps drive the program forward.
Yes. And so in the short amount of time that we have left, I mean, I can't believe that we're so fast near the end. I'm kind of feeling like we need a rural discussion part 2.
Maybe. I think that's a good idea.
But to kind of put we'll put an exclamation point on the end of this session, we're going to go back to Claire Ann and ask Claire, in a little bit about how you've used intergenerational programming to build those strong connections between youth and older community members. You already alluded to it a little bit. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you've done that and also engaging families in the whole process?
Yeah, you bet. You guys okay if we watch a short clip? We've got one.
Sure. Go for it.
This is this is part of the water educational video series I referenced earlier with Fort Belknap. This video to me exemplifies the intergenerational part. We won't watch the whole clip just so we can connect on your question before closing up, but this is Donovan Archambault. He'll introduce himself and tell a little bit about who he is, and then I'll ask Hunter, my wonderful IT assistant, here to cut the video. So all of our videos are on our website. I know NTAC's providing links, but yeah, so I'll kind of feel where we're gonna cut it. It's a 4-minute video. We won't watch the whole thing. So if you want to roll that for us, thank you, Hunter.
My name is Donovan Archambault. My native name was Tatanga Hokshin, and it means buffalo boy. I guess the fondest memories of my life are here at Fort Belknap from the time I grew up as a little boy and went off to boarding school and army, and then coming back here and becoming the tribal chairman and elected to the tribal government for 16 years. Snake Butte means a lot to me because my grandmother fasted here back in the 1920s. She was a healer for the tribes, and that's where she got her power. So I come up here every chance I get. I get my water here a lot of times. I believe everybody understands the importance of water. It's life to us. We're an agricultural community. Agriculture is our #1 industry here at Fort Belknap.
All right, Rebecca? Yep. All right, so yeah, that's just the beginning of a 3-minute story there on Donovan's experience in Fort Belknap. But again, remember the crew, the production crew behind the camera, were all high school youth and a couple college-aged youth. So yeah, having that opportunity, and not just in tribal communities, the story catching, if you will, the recording, whether it be on podcast, audio, or on video, it's happening in all of our program sites. That's indisputable, that saving of the story, the archiving, right? Particularly in tribal communities. So when you say about family engagement up there, oh boy, at that shoot, we had moms, we had aunties, we had people wanting to see the youth interviewing and learning the camera, especially on the aerial photography, learning how to do the drone, even though they weren't in the workshop. They were all of different ages, including younger siblings. They just wanted to see what their family member, their daughter, sister, niece, or nephew were doing. So yeah, again, it's part of what we do as far as the bells and whistles of media arts. But yeah, for youth to be able to, in this case, I mean, this video series it's life-changing for their tribes, and they're participants in this. They're the key stakeholders to make this whole project happen. So having that honor, that's a profound one, and I know that from all the youth that worked on this project. So that's just one example of the many ways we do our best to incorporate all voices, whether it's behind or in front of the camera. Yeah. No. Next question.
We want to give our audience a little bit of time. And so I know that we had some more planned questions for you, but we would like to take one or possibly two questions from the audience. That's really all we have time for. So I'm going to ask our producer, Dave, what kind of questions do we have?
That's great. First of all, I want to say you two ladies are doing some wonderful stuff. I mean, absolutely amazing. I did have there is a question for you, Claire. Deanna wants to know if there is a website link that you could share in the chat or something, so they could see about your program that you could,
You bet you. Our wonderful IT person, who, by the way, is a MAPS graduate. So I know we didn't get to talk a lot about the future of, empowering youth for future success, but this young man over here who's doing everything, yeah, he came as a 18-year-old and now he's 24 and running all of MAPS for real. Anyway, he's going to put the website in there. Thank you for asking. mapsmediainstitute.com. And also I am available, whether you hit me up through the website or if you'd also put my email in there for me, Hunter, on my email. I'll get back to you within a day. Anybody. And we're all about collaboration. We actually have two hopeful ones. Our first one's out of state in conversation right now. So just know we are open to big ideas. So that's my only pitch.
That's great. Also, too, if you wanted to, we do have a few minutes for questions, and for Amanda and for Claire. If you wanted to go ahead and just raise your hand, you can raise your hand, and we can unmute you, and you can ask your question to either Amanda or Claire. And while I'm going to do that too, I want to make sure that I add in here. I'm going to paste this into our chat before. I know some people are busy and they have to go, but please take a moment. Let us know in this feedback. Let us know how you liked our program today. This helps us out. While I'm doing it, I don't see any other questions coming in.
Great. Okay.
Can they give one?
Well,
Okay.
I was about to ask, I'm
Yes.
like, let's just, if you can give us just one more thought to leave us on, both Claire Ann and Amanda, if you could just kind of just give us that like one piece of tidbit that you think will sum up the day, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Amanda, you want to take it first?
Sure. The one thing I would say is be open to what comes your way. Sometimes the direction may not be what you envisioned, but it's within your vision and your mission statement, and it can take you to amazing places. Constantly be open. There's no room for this won't work, it didn't before. There is room for we can, we did, or we can, we will, we did, just, and open yourself to new ideas. People will walk in and say, hey, I really want to start this program. And you're going, I don't know how we can support that, but they will come in and they will support your program and it will just fly. And be open to different ideas and different people, and just constantly remember we're talking about youth, right? The implementing of it has a lot to do with some background stuff, but if you keep your focus on the fact that we're looking to just help these youth have experiences to take them in whatever direction they need, I think you'll be successful.
It's great, Amanda, and very true. You took my line, Amanda. I'm teasing. I would, and again, in closing, thank you, everybody. Again, really learned a lot here, both on how to present, as well as all the insightful info you shared. My guiding light still, I have two, if I may share. One is to take good care of yourself. We do talk a lot about simple things like staying hydrated and eating well and balancing work and life. And I know there's all these, trendy words out there, but it's not an understatement. All of us know what burnout is, have either experienced it or have had people around us experience it. And you got to take care of yourself in order to do the good work. That's something people remind me of on our team, and I certainly give that back. And then the second one, and it kind of relates to the first one because it's about listening, active listening, right? Listening to yourself, engaging what you can do and can't do, or what you need to do in order to do something. But in a broader sense, truly listening, truly hearing, and being open to learning on what you're experiencing when you're working with other people. And often that means putting our own things off to the side for a little while. Understanding that context of where something's coming from. So yeah, listening to yourself and listening to others. Big one for me every day.
I mean, what sage advice. And we are just so incredibly grateful to you, Claire Ann, to Amanda for joining us today, sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience with us. Today has been too short.
Agreed.
It's just been so much valuable information. So as we wrap up, on behalf of the 21st CCLC NTAC, we want to thank you, our audience, for joining us. Please take a moment to fill out the feedback form, which you'll find in the chat. It is from feedback forms that we develop content to support you. We listen to what you tell us you need, and hopefully things like today's session will meet those needs. We also want to encourage you to check out our website. Some QR codes will be on the screen in a moment here, where you can access our website, sign up for our newsletter, check us out on social media. We're on LinkedIn and X. And so as we close today, again, just a special thank you to our audience, to our panelists, and to my co-host, Hillary. Thank you so much, all of you, for your generous time and contribution to today's discussion. We could have not have done it without you. So thanks again for joining us. And Hillary?
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure to be with you all and to have this powerful conversation.
I agree. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.